Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Welcome, come and join the celebration because this is the 1000th episode of the Business Essentials Daily podcast. We launched in 2020 just as COVID started, and here we are 4 years later, guiding you through a different set of turbulent times, but still bringing you the best information about how to protect and grow your business. Nick Schildberger is Managing Director of SoundCartel, and he joins me to celebrate and discuss how we got here and some of the exciting projects coming up for SoundCartel as part of a broader look at podcasting and its impact on business over time. Nick, congratulations on 1,000 episodes of Be Daily.
It's very exciting, isn't it? And congratulations back to you, more importantly, for being the host and producer of all 1,000 episodes.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you. But it's a team effort. We've got multiple producers working on it. So thank you to Pete, Chris and Jeff, our producers and incredible sound engineers. Let's take a step back. Why start Be Daily in the first place? What was the purpose?
Well, we've actually got to take a step even further back in time. Some of the listeners to this podcast might not realise that Business Essentials, the audio magazine, started all the way back in August 1984. So we're excited about 1,000 episodes, but we've actually produced as a business more than 4,000 business interviews under the brand Business Essentials. It also means that this year, 2024, we're celebrating our 40th birthday.
Yes, multiple celebrations.
So there's a lot going on. But the reason for Business Essentials, I guess, before we get to the podcast, was to deliver business advice and inspiration to small and medium-sized business owners. Now, think back to 1984. There was no internet. There was far, far less access to reliable business information. So this business was founded to produce that information and get it to business owners in an audio format so they could listen in the car. So in many ways, very much ahead of their time. So starting the podcast back in 2020, the first year of COVID, was an interesting time to be launching a new project of any sort. Yeah. The landscape had changed a lot, and the podcast now is more about helping business owners curate the overload of information that's out there. And it's very hard to know what's reliable, what's trustworthy. There's so many different sources, so much fake news these days. So our job as producers is really to curate the best content, still provide it to the same types of people, business owners, small and medium particularly. Larger corporates and enterprises have access to a lot of information internally through their own networks. It's always been, really, for 40 years, it's the smaller businesses that are often forgotten and overlooked. And the podcast itself was really because podcasting has become more and more popular every year.
That's exactly right, Nick. But let's just talk about topics and breadth of focus and information. What areas are we covering across Be Daily?
Well, as you well know, as the lead producer, it's a very broad range of topics. We deliberately haven't gone down a really niche channel. We wanted to give business owners a well-rounded approach to running a business. So everything from leadership, customer service, what's the economy doing? Right now, what are interest rates doing? Are they going to come down? We've seen shifts in the types of information that are in demand right at the start of COVID. The first 18 months to 2 years, there was lots of information about surviving COVID. What were the laws that were changing? There were shutdowns in different parts of the country. So we shifted our focus to follow the trends and what was important to businesses at that time. I think right now there's a lot of interest in cost of living, interest rates, what's the economy going to do moving forward, how can businesses best prepare themselves to survive tougher times that we're in at the moment, and then come out the other side with a thriving business.
I think health and wellness, mental health particularly, is something that's really taken off in the last few years too. Technology, cybersecurity obviously has been huge, and we've covered that quite a bit. So we try to stay on newsworthy topics as well as general business growth information too. So it's a really well-rounded suite of topics that we try to deliver.
All the ingredients you need to run a successful business. And most of the things you mentioned just then, Nicole, probably weren't topics 20 years ago, were they? So
100%.
Things have changed a lot.
And as you mentioned, podcasting as a medium has continued to thrive and grow year on year. There's more than 4 million podcasts globally. So it makes sense for Be Daily to continue within the medium and for businesses to be able to tell their stories with more people listening than ever.
Yeah, podcast listenership really took a big jump during COVID. So we were launching right at a time when podcasting was also having a big kick. Worldwide now, there are more than 500 million listeners to podcasts. Just in the year of 2020, the number of podcasts doubled in 1 year. And there was a new podcast launch on average somewhere in the world every 30 seconds. So despite podcasting being around for 10 or 12 years before that, it really was when people had more time on their hands, and also technology advances have made it easier to produce podcasts, that we saw a big jump. And people had more time to listen as well.
They did.
And the audiences, importantly, have been growing. Edison Research do an Australian survey every year called the Infinite Dial. So the last one they did was the middle of 2023. It showed that monthly and weekly podcast listening had hit all-time highs, and that 43% of Australians over the age of 12 have listened to a podcast in the last month, and 1 in 10 Australians are listening to podcasts daily.
Yeah, there was a period of time where the pundits were saying we've reached peak podcasting and people were worried about podcasting falling off a cliff. But why do you think podcasts are booming more than ever now?
It's pretty simple, Nicole. It's because they work.
Yes.
And the audience has spoken. With their ears, they're listening in bigger numbers, as I just said.
Yeah, when you think about it, podcasts really are a fraction of the total content being created.
And as to why they're so successful, and I think they really have become a critical part of any business's communication strategy and planning. And they're reasons that we've discussed before on Podcasting Essentials, but it's that opportunity to have long-form conversations with your customers. We know that people will be quite happy to listen to 20 to 30 minutes without interruption when it's a podcast. You just don't get that attention span with other forms of media.
And it's conversations that are delivered in a completely different way. And if your audience is already there listening to podcasts, why wouldn't you create something that meets them where they are?
And brands can be authentic and they become a trusted source. We're hungry for information. We want to educate and learn all the time, but we're also becoming increasingly busy. And that's where podcasting fits so nicely, because it can be done while multitasking. You know, you can be out walking the dog, driving your car, on the train to and from work. So
cleaning, cooking.
Yep, absolutely. And the other thing is that advertising works really well in podcasting. The return on investment is high because, again, people have got their headphones on and they're tuned in and listening intently. You know, radio, you're competing in the background to get attention. A podcast, you're very much front of mind when you're advertising. So we've seen a growth in the advertising dollars coming into the podcasting industry year on year as well.
And of course, technology is having a huge impact on the podcasting industry, particularly with AI of late. It's been a huge disruptor to all industries. It's almost like a second industrial revolution. It's that impactful. What jumps out for you as you've kind of looked around and seen what tech and AI are bringing to podcasting?
Well, AI is on the tip of everyone's tongue at the moment. It seems to be such a big buzzword. It's not a new thing in podcasting. There have been AI tools to help particularly in post-production for a while now, but they're improving every day and there are new things being released in beta form all the time. Our head of audio, Peter Letts, is using them all the time with our own projects, and it's getting to that tipping point where AI is starting to do as good a job as a human, but much faster. But also then the noise reduction and the processing and all of that, sound engineers have so many more tools at their fingertips. So there's a lot that can be done, and it's exciting for the listeners to podcasts because, you know, immersive sound and, you know, mixing in Dolby Atmos, which is like having a movie on a podcast, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. I think we've got to be careful too, because AI has come in kind of hard and fast, but a lot of this stuff is also in beta.
I think people get really concerned that AI is going to take away human jobs. I think in audio, you still need someone with a very high level of skill to implement the AI so that you still get a really good result at the end.
Yeah. Let's finish with a look ahead to see what the future holds for Business Essentials Daily, and maybe also a bit about SoundCartel and the podcasting industry. What's in store?
Well, I'll start with Business Essentials Daily because that's where we are today. We're going to continue on doing what we've done for 40 years, tracking trends in business and giving business owners all the practical tools they need to grow their business. But we're also very open to feedback. So if you're listening right now and you've got topics that you'd like us to cover, I'm sure Nicole would love to hear from you.
Yeah, just let us know.
And it would be negligent of me not to ask for a quick favour. If you do like listening to this podcast, it would be greatly appreciated if you could rate and review it in your preferred podcast app. It all helps get the podcast into more people's ears.
It really does.
Now, on the SoundCartel side of things, there's lots of exciting projects. We've just finished a really fun podcast that you know all about, Nicole, the Great Australian Detour Kids Cast that we produced in partnership with Subaru. It was so fun working with kids and also a fabulous host in Andrew Datto.
Yes, it was just a terrific experience producing that podcast, and it's great for listening in the car. If you've got kids, they can listen to episodes all about native animals, honeybees, what makes Australia great, great white sharks. The list goes on. It's just a really fun, interesting podcast.
Another one that we're doing on an ongoing basis at the moment is called the Churchill Collective. That's where we hear really fascinating and diverse stories from people who have completed a Churchill Fellowship. That means they've gone overseas and studied and then brought those skills back to Australia. But they have covered some very left-of-field topics. I won't spoil it. Go check out that podcast. Adam Spencer is another fabulous host to work with. Super smart and just really engaging in his interviews with those guests.
Yeah, it's a great one.
We've got a couple of new projects that we're working on right now, also with two very exciting female hosts, but I better not share what they are just yet. And also some SoundCartel branded podcasts of our own are on the horizon, but I can't say too much about them either. I'm sorry.
Dangling the carrot, Nick.
I know. Just make sure you follow the SoundCartel socials and you'll be the first to know. Something else that's been growing in the podcasting world is private podcasts. So we've been doing that here at SoundCartel for decades. We used to call it internal communication, but that's where businesses are using audio to communicate with their team internally. So we do a lot of that work. But again, it's just using audio in a really smart way for businesses to keep their own teams updated with what's going on.
And engaged in a different way.
I think the industry as a whole is just getting more and more exciting. The different styles of shows being produced, there's both on a non-fiction and fictional side, and the way they're being produced, just really engaging storytelling, amazing scripting, and the sound design, it's just going next level. And I think that's just going to keep pushing the bar higher and higher, which is great for audiences. It also means there are more and more opportunities for advertisers to have their message heard inside podcasts that have got huge audiences. So there are now really two solid choices. You can produce your own podcast, or you can advertise in other podcasts, or a combination of both. So both sides of the equation are proving to be effective, and both are growing. And if you've made it to the end of this episode, thank you for allowing us to be a little self-indulgent. We don't do it all that often, so thank you for listening. We really hope you continue to find value in this podcast. And if you have an idea for a podcast, or you want to talk to us about anything podcast related, we'd love to hear from you.
That was Nick Schildberger, Managing Director of SoundCartel. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more B Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.